Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's session of the Midlife Reinvention Summit. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to Holly Bertone, who will be sharing her own personal story of midlife reinvention. In fact, she's had multiple reinventions. So, Holly is a former FBI Chief of Staff for Counterintelligence and is now known as the Emotional Eating Profiler and Coach. She helps smart, successful women over 40 break the patterns of emotional eating, ditch diet culture, and prioritize their health so their high achievement lifestyle no longer clashes with unwanted weight gain. Holly spent 20 years in project management, consulting, and federal government service after her own experience with breast cancer and healing herself from an autoimmune disease. She learned that there's no more to life than burning the candle at both ends and living according to everyone else's agenda. Holly is a certified project management professional, certified holistic health coach, certified behavioral profiler, keynote speaker, and host of Weight Loss Forensics podcasts. So, Holly, thank you so much for taking part in the Midlife Reinvention Summit. So, how are you going today?
I am great, Damien. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be here and to serve and to share my story.
Awesome. Well, let's go back to, I guess, one of your more pivotal moments when you were working for the FBI. So you had a medical diagnosis, and that kind of like began your journey to where you are today. So perhaps we can go back to there, give the audience a bit of perspective where you were in life, and then what happened to set you off on this journey that you've gone on.
When I turned 40, or sorry, not 49, 39, when I turned 39, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, literally diagnosed with breast cancer on my 39th birthday. And I was the chief of staff for FBI counterintelligence at the time. And I was engaged, ended up being married, had a stepson, ended up getting divorced, but that's later on. And I so I got engaged, diagnosed with breast cancer at the same time. And we ended up going through surgery, chemo, radiation. So I did the whole thing, especially because I was young. Now looking at it, I'd probably do a different route, but that's what I did back then. And when I finished treatment, I never got healthy again. I just kept getting sicker and sicker. And they finally diagnosed me with an autoimmune disease with Hashimoto's. And again, things I know today that I didn't know back then. I mean, my body was just screaming for help. It was in a chronic state of inflammation. I didn't know it back then. So I'm dealing with this autoimmune disease. I've got this high powered, high stress career at the FBI. I've got, a husband, a young stepson, and it was a lot. And if anyone knows Hashimoto's, one of the biggest side effects is the fatigue. So in my head, I think, again, not knowing what I know today about health, but back then, all I could think about was after everything I've been through, this is just how life is supposed to be. I'm just supposed to be tired and fatigued and miserable my entire life. And I fell into that victim mentality because I didn't think there were any other options. So I was trying to be happy and positive while completely spiraling at the same time. And everything hit in 2017 when I just couldn't do it anymore. I mean, I could barely get out of bed, I could barely work, and my career at the FBI was suffering. And I was there for 13 years. I was not an agent, I was support staff, but I was there for 13 years, started in Quantico. We did some post 9/11 electronic surveillance, kind of the fun stuff they do in Quantico. They transferred me up to headquarters. I worked some national security, worked for weapons of mass destruction, helped to get the directorate stood up. And then that's when they opened up the GS-15 Chief of Staff billet for me in counterintelligence, which is a huge honor if anyone understands the government system and especially law enforcement, to not be an agent to get that billet, to be a female to get that billet. And I was on the contractor side and they moved me over to the government side. So I was a complete outsider. And that was unheard of. So not trying to flex or brag, but just to set the context that working at the FBI was my entire identity. I mean, it was everything. It was everything. And it was such a huge honor to work there. And like my entire life was wrapped around my career. And when my ex and I made the decision that, my health, I just couldn't do it anymore. And we tried a few options at work and nothing worked. I mean, the only option I was looking at that point was to resign. And going through breast cancer treatment, going through the Hashimoto's was nothing compared to the despair that I felt when I resigned from the FBI. And the first 2 months were horrible because I just didn't know who I was without my career. It ended up working out, obviously. After a few months of just marinating in my own misery, I dove full into my own healing, became certified and got several health coaching certifications, started coaching part-time a little bit, mostly blogging, but doing a little bit of health coaching. And it also gave me the opportunity, my stepson was in middle school at the time, and it gave me an opportunity to be a stay-at-home mom for him and to give him that stability, which was honestly at that point in time the best of both worlds. But and I don't know if you want me to start getting into the transition or if you had any questions about that.
Yeah, no, it seems like a lot of people do go through some kind of like a health kind of like scare, etc. So how did you navigate this reinvention kind of period? As you said in the first part, like most people get hit by some kind of a change, like this has been forced upon you. It's not a choice necessarily. So, for our nervous system, generally, this is like uncertain territory before life seems to be going along. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I feel like I have some control. Now, all control has been taken away from me, and then I'm off into completely new territory. So, beyond the marinating in the uncomfortableness of all of this, which we all go through at different levels whenever change happens, what helped you to kind of like move out and then obviously forward and to actually begin the reinvention journey? Because who you are now isn't the person who was marinating for 2 months. You've changed quite considerably. What helped you get back out, start going back upward on an upward trajectory again?
So I can talk about the initial reinvention and then I can talk about the second tier reinvention
Sure.
because they're very different. And I think that first one was, I'm going to give the credit to my friend now, rest in peace, he's in heaven. My friend Garnet was going through brain cancer treatment at the same time I was going through breast cancer treatment. And he had started a blog, and I wasn't blogging yet, but I was, we ended up just kind of small town, hometown, and emailing our friends and our family with our journeys. And we had this kind of dueling banjo thing going on with who could be the funniest and the most irreverent when it came to just our experience with going through cancer. And having him by my side really helped to put it in a different perspective. And that perspective came around full circle because the first place that I landed was going back to the breast cancer and the autoimmune community and just saying, hey, you don't have to be stuck in this misery. Like, even though you're going through something, you know, you can have a different path. And more on the motivation side than anything else. And that felt good for a while. And I landed there for a while and I really felt like I was doing good. I was helping others. I was motivating. Like I felt like I was just, after everything that I had been through, I felt like I needed to give back in some way, shape, or form. Like I needed to pay it forward. I needed to take all of the mess and turn it into the message, as as cliche as the saying is. I mean, that's really what we do. And that was well and good. And it was also very safe. Being kind of the rah-rah cheerleader was very safe. And fast forward to 2022 was when my ex and I got divorced. So I moved, we were in the Washington, D.C. area, and I moved back to Pennsylvania, back to my hometown. And I made the big decision. I was like, okay, I can either get a full-time job or I can take this part-time coaching and turn it into something big, like turn it into something full-time. And so I started to coach full-time. And I realized the traditional kind of health coaching aspect because I was like right in that part motivational, part health coach kind of kind of hybrid, and it felt very heavy. I don't know how to explain it. I knew I was good at it, but it felt heavy. Obviously, it wasn't aligned.
Yep.
And every place that I turned, the path kept directing me back to my own weight loss journey and the demons that I had to overcome with food addiction, emotional eating, binge eating. But I didn't want to go there because I felt like, oh, if you're in the weight loss space, you just have to show a bunch of before and after pictures and push all these like crazy diet tactics and things like that. And I realized like that doesn't have to be the case. But I was also extremely embarrassed to make that transition because if I was to make that transition, that means I had to tell my story about being, and I'm just going to say it, I was a fat health coach. And I felt like a fraud. And I think that's part of why I played in more of the motivational space so much, was because I was like, well, why would anyone take me seriously? And that was the catalyst that really got me to. I think part of it was just this, getting divorced, being on my own, not having a spouse to rely on. It's kind of this sink or swim. And I took a chance. I took a very scary chance on myself. And 3 years later, I'm 54 and still single and still figuring it out, but landed where I finally feel like I'm home.
Very good. Well, I guess the point that I'm getting from this is because a lot of people assume that you need to know the answer, like basically a change happens in your life, and then magically you got to come up with the perfect next step, and then you're going to land there, and then life is going to be amazing. But very few times in life is it a linear kind of like path. You need to make a step and then experiment, and then as you said, you were trying different things, the motivational side, you were trying the coaching side, and you were gathering data, you were gathering information, and you were sensing, yes, I like some of these aspects, but it's not completely me. And then it's hard once again because now you have to reinvent yourself again. Once again, uncertainty, lack of control, obviously being divorced. Now you're by yourself. So once again, you don't have that support system maybe which you had before. And then you now I've got to make another choice. But it seems this choice was difficult but somewhat easier because you'd already been through that reinvention journey. And then I guess you kind of like understood that it's not game over if it doesn't work. I should experiment again. So you felt a little bit more comfortable doing it, and you probably didn't have the 2 or 3 months of wallowing in the uncertainty that you had before. So
But I think the biggest roadblock that I had during, the final, I should say, I don't know if it's final, but the last big reinvention was how afraid I was of putting myself out there and telling my story. And also, I developed my own emotional eating methodology based on my own food demons, based on my experience at the FBI, based on behavioral profiling, and psychology, which is very different than what's out there. And I had this huge fear of judgment, not just from other people and random people, but from my peers in the industry, from my peers who were fellow health coaches and practitioners. Because I was like, well, what are they going to say? Are they, and almost like that imposter syndrome, like, do I really know what I'm doing? And it took a long time to get past just being afraid of what other people are going to say. I mean, I'm finally like rear view mirror and shut the door on the way out, and I have not looked back. And I think the more I have shed those layers of wearing the mask and pretending to be something that I wasn't, the more I shed that, the more I actually step into who I am and what I believe. I mean, I've now coached hundreds of women, which is just beyond my wildest dreams to be able to have this reach and expansion. But I think different kind of fear. And yes, I did it before, I can do it again. But this time I was really facing that, that the pure pressure internally. I even lost some friends over it. And I had to be okay with that. I was like, you know what? You are the five people, as the saying goes, you're the five people who you spend the most time with. And I was like, if they're not going to support me, they weren't my true friends anyway. And, they have left my life, but I've had some amazing supportive people come into my life who are more aligned with not just who I am, but where I want to go with this next step with my business.
awesome. No, the limiters, the kind of things that our beliefs and other things, our identity, are some of the things that hold us back from reinventing ourselves. They kind of like that the demon chatter in our head kind of like prevents us actually making that decision. But as you said, like once you were able to go through that, you have a new kind of like lease of life. So it's kind of like they hold you back, and then now you're overcome that, and you're on the other side. But I guess it's because you took steps or action. You didn't let them stop you. You were reluctant, but you kind of explored. You went backwards and forwards, and you kind of moved your way forward. I think all too often we hear the voices and then we don't take any kind of action. And then you were courageous enough to take some steps. And I think that's the most important thing, to get some kind of momentum kind of like going if intuitively you feel that's right. So would you say you taking some kind of action was a way to kind of like move forward, or what was it that allowed you to kind of like overcome these voices in your head, the fear that you would lose some friends, etc.?
I 100% agree. the fast decision making and just the ability to just keep moving forward is the only thing that's like kept me going forward. And I notice this myself. I also, it's how kind of explain it to my clients is that, you've got this old identity here and you've got this new person, this business, this reinvention that you want to be. And I mean, anyone who's ever started a business, grown a business, knows that it is the biggest personal growth journey you are ever going to be on. Same with going through, a health condition. It's like you just dive deep into the personal growth side, but you can't have one foot on the old identity and try to straddle and have one foot on the new identity. Like you actually have to leap and make that jump off of the old identity. And there's that space in the middle, that liminal space before you land into the new identity, where you're like, I have no foundation. I am in the air. I am flailing around. I have no clue what I'm doing. But that's when you just have to keep moving forward. And that's what I did. And I think that liminal space probably lasted a year, maybe a year and a half. I mean, it was pretty scary to just not have the stability that I needed, and especially being my one and only breadwinner. But I knew that every single step that I took forward was taking me forward. And God provided, I think, what do they say? Fortune favors the ones who, I don't know, something like that. But God provided because I was taking those actions. And every single time I took those steps, new doors would open. And the craziest thing is that the more I have really just laser focused into completely eliminating the masks and all of the things that held me back, all of the limiting beliefs, and kind of show up, and I'm not going to curse, but I'm going to call it the IDGAF kind of attitude, right? The I don't give a flying
Yeah.
attitude. And when I embraced that was when things just started to go bonkers. And even just recently, I'll give you a recent example, which is crazy. On Instagram, I was hiding, I like to say, I was just doing B-roll and some music and a caption, but I really wasn't. I mean, I have a podcast. It's got over 200 episodes, but I don't speak on Instagram. And I saw this challenge going on. They're like, it's 100 days of yapping, and you basically hit record and you talk, you yap. It got me out of my comfort zone. I think I'm like 2 weeks in, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks in. I am still a little like, ah, but every single time I hit record, it gets easier and easier and easier. And what's crazy is that the growth that I have been seeing, even just on Instagram in the last few months, has just been crazy. And now that I'm actually showing up, I'm talking, I'm sharing my opinions, I'm sharing my viewpoints, even some controversial, it's like, okay, that is how I've been building, as they say, the cult following, the true brand, like showing up as me and not being afraid to speak the things that I want to speak about.
Awesome. No, brilliant. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about leaving this old identity because I think this is the big one for many of us and who are looking to reinvent. Is like we have created who we believe we are, and then we kind of have an understanding we don't really like who we are at this particular point in time. It's not really serving us, it's not really working for us. And we have a kind of vision of who we'd like to be, but it seems like it's Mount Everest. It's kind of like out there, it's not. I'd like to be like this, but I've got all of this back here. How do you, when talking, because you mentioned you can't have your foot in both camps, how do you now, because you've made the break, teach other people how they can make the break with this old identity and start assuming this, like obviously you are still in the process, but you're a long way into the process. And that's because you were able to make the break. So how do you guide other people to do the same thing?
I think half of it is shedding the old, half of it is remembering who you are. And I think when you shed the old, you actually the real you starts to surface. But if you think about like, and can you see my hand?
Yep.
Okay, so you're here on this plane, and let's say you have a goal and you think the goal is up here. But if the goal is up here, it's going to feel like Mount Everest. Like, how on earth am I going to get up here? And you don't have that identity to get here. So it is going to seem like an uphill struggle. But when you can remember who you are and really go back to what makes you you, like what are your superpowers, that is when things start to level. So rather than going from, being down here and this goal is up here, you're now on equal ground. And it's more just like, okay, it's equal ground. I just have to make the jump lateral rather than going up the mountain. And in my case, when I was at the FBI, the office that I was in charge of, we ran pattern analysis on spies and espionage. And I mean, if you think about it, I've been doing this since I was a kid. I would, when I was 10 years old, I'd get out, we had this huge dining room table. I would get three different, like 500 or 1,000 piece puzzles, dump all of them out on the table, mix them up, and then put them back together. And I mean, I was doing that when I was 10. I did it at the FBI. And, when you think about the CSI shows or the police shows are on TV and you have that board, with the victims and the suspects and everything, you've got the red yarn going everywhere. That's how my brain works. And to be able to tap into that to say, okay, this, like when I was the happiest, when I was at the FBI, running pattern analysis. So, how can I tap into that to do this when it comes to emotional eating? How can I tap into this to help my clients just get results that they've never even dreamed of? Beyond the weight loss, beyond the diets, beyond all the stuff that, gets pushed out there. Like, how can we actually make permanent change? And all that is looking at those patterns as a tool to go from you're here, the goal is here. How can we level that playing field? And I did that with myself. I do it with my clients, but it's only because I went back to her and I went back to what my natural gift has always been. And that's when I can work 12-hour days that are just crushing, like hard, long hour, long days, but feel so energized and so as like just leave everything on the field. Like I'm done for the day. I wake up in the morning and I'm just so jazzed to jump into my next day because I love what I do so much.
Awesome. No, it's interesting because because a lot of people assume reinventing means you completely change who you are, but what you're describing is when you're reinventing, in fact, it could be you're refinding who you were by stripping away all the things that the conditioning has been put on you, like society, other things you thought you needed to do, and that's all kind of been layered on top of you. And then part of the reinvention is stripping away all of that and then actually getting back to the essence of who you are. Your goal is still there, but now you're working from a foundation, which is who you are. And then now the journey of reinvention is just like how do you keep on growing who you are? Like this particular person, as opposed to before, maybe you were trying to all the time fight against the conditioning, and then you had an essence of what you knew intuitively what you wanted to do. Your true self was going, yeah, we need to do this. Then the other side's going like this. So you're in this constant battle. Whereas now, when you can strip that away, now you're able to focus 100% on who you are and grow that part of you. So reinvention is actually sometimes coming back to who you are so that you can elevate yourself to achieve what you would like to achieve.
And stripping all of those limiting beliefs, like just kicking them out the door and saying, you are not allowed to come back here ever again. That was hard. That was really hard because the it wasn't just worrying about what other people were going to say, but it was the own thoughts that I had in my head and actually believing them. And I was like, no, that's not true. That's just something that's trying to hold me back. So that was one of the hardest battles, was to overcome those limiting beliefs of I'm not good enough, or I can't do this, or I'm not qualified, or people aren't going to like me, or, I'm going to be an outcast, or, whatever, just to face them and to say, no, you don't belong here anymore.
So your process was to just hold them to account, challenge them, and then basically take action to prove they were wrong.
A lot of time in the silence, a lot of meditation, just there was, I think it was about yeah, it was the first year um, of the divorce and when I was on my own. And my inner healing was a full-time job. I mean, it was 40 hours a week that I was sitting in the quiet and the meditation and the prayer and just battling the battles that I needed to battle to get to the other side, doing some EFT tapping and some somatic work and things like that. But it was worth it because and coming out of multiple rock bottoms in my life and being able to say, and that's the other thing too, Damien, is kind of the through point of all of this, is that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of the stuff that I went through. I mean, yeah, it was hard. I wouldn't want to wish any of that on anyone, but it's given me the strength to be doing what I'm doing, to be able to be of service to hundreds of women, to be able to kick all these limiting beliefs, to be able to say, like, I have big dreams and visions for what I want to do in the future, and not be in that place of can I do it, but just being in that place of, okay, it's just a matter of when it's going to happen. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of that. So I am so extremely thankful for all of those tough times. I think so many times, we hit those rock bottoms, we hit those points, and we're like, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's easy. Like, I mean, trust me, I spent plenty of time marinating in my misery. But at some point, when we can get out of that and we can say, okay, how is this being used as a stepping stone to get me to that next step? What have I learned? How can I say thank you to all of these hard times, and to show up in that place of gratitude for everything that you went through? I actually just did some somatic work with a practitioner just a few weeks ago. I was having some pain and I was like, okay, I know this is still some, you know, remnant trauma. And, so he's like, hey, what are you here for? I'm like, my shoulder hurts, like, I'm not going to get into the whole thing. And I was like, my shoulder hurts. It's like, you and I know what the real deal is. But, and so anyway, so he's doing all this stuff. And I am just like, I mean, it's like pain to get the pain away. And as I felt the pain releasing the entire time I was on the table, I just kept saying, thank you to the pain. Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for holding on to all of these emotions and keeping me safe. You are officially released. It is time for you to go. So, I mean, it's just a practice that I have that I've incorporated for years now, is to be able to take this stuff that I've gone through from that place of gratitude to say, okay, this is a huge boulder and a huge stepping stone to get me to where I want to go.
Awesome. No, it's incredible how you've managed to kind of like turn your challenges into opportunities. And it is really the secret to being successful at anything. It's because obviously when you're in your misery zone, nothing really moves forward, does it? So being able to now, after all of this, to be able to kind of like see these as kind of like opportunities and positives in your life, that's quite an adjustment, but it's not an easy one. And as you said, it's taken you a bit of time to come to that realization, but now you're on the other side, you're reaping the rewards. So a takeaway for me is the quicker we can get to accepting what we're experiencing, we may not like what we're experiencing, the easier it is to kind of find a way forward. Because if we spend too much time not accepting, then we're going to always be fighting against ourselves. We're going to be resisting against something we can't really change. And so when we get free of that, then there's space to move forward. So it's good to hear
And
now that you've
yeah,
got this.
and one of my favorite quotes, and I say this in jest, but it is kind of funny. And when talking about this and everything that I've been through, and I just kind of laugh. I said, "Yeah, I eat failure and bacon for breakfast every morning, so bring it." I mean, but it's serious. Like if you can look at the failure and failure, whatever, you can look at it as, oh, woe is me, I'm a failure, I'm a failure. You can look at it as, okay, I'm one step closer to succeeding. You're like, yeah, I am going to eat that for breakfast every morning.
No, definitely. So brilliant. So what's one of the biggest lessons? Obviously, you've shared a few lessons, but what's another big lesson you've learned from these multiple reinventions that you would like to share with the audience?
Let's go back to failure, because I think so many people get into the perfectionist and the procrastination. I'm going to kick the can down the road. I'm going to start this. I'm going to, start this business or get this divorce or, do this thing when the time is right, when work slows down, when the kid's out of school, when. And we just when then ourselves to death. And it's never going to happen. Life is never going to slow down. The work project is always going to be like, life is always going to be there. And if you can look at failure as just a part of the process and redefine failure as this horrible thing, like I'm a failure, and take it as this like personal front that you're not a good enough person, and just separate yourself from that and look at failure as just a part of the process. I mean, no one, not one person on this earth has gotten to be successful without failure being a part of that process. It's just like you eat, you sleep, you floss your teeth, and you go have failure for breakfast. Like, do it. And the more times you fail, number one, the easier it gets. You're like, oh yeah, whatever. you know and as you make it a part of the process, it takes that edge off. It takes that all of that the weight and those expectations. And also, when we were at the very beginning, we were talking about those fast decisions. When you put failure into the mix, like it has to be, it's not even an option, it has to be one of those ingredients. Like, you don't get to go from point A to point B without it. So it has to be an ingredient. So when you can change your perspective and say, okay, I'm gonna eat failure for breakfast every morning, then it just becomes a part of your day, like brushing your teeth, and you're like, okay, I can do this, I can move on. And every single day, those really scary, uncomfortable, unknown steps, getting from point A to point B, and that scary liminal space in the middle, it just gets a lot easier.
Awesome. And beyond this, what's a message of hope you would like to give to someone who is facing some kind of change being forced on them, be it health, be it relationship, be it career? What's the message you would like to give them, and what's the path forward for them?
Don't give up. I know it's hard to hit those rock bottoms, and especially when it wasn't something that you were planning. But if you can look at it from that perspective of, is this happening to me or for me? And looking at it from that perspective of, how is this happening for me? And operating from that place of this or better. I love that phrase, this or better, because, anytime an opportunity doesn't happen, it's like, okay, well, something better is going to happen tomorrow. And it normally does. And when it doesn't, I know it's still going to happen, even if it's a week or a month later. So when you can be in that space, and I have been called Holly Anna, kind of like Pollyanna, but Holly. I have been called a Holly Anna, but honestly, like, what's the alternative? To just walk around being miserable? I mean, who wants to do that? So, yeah, so I take my life and my career and my health very seriously, but you are going to see me have a very light side in life, because I was like, it, we need to be in that place where we can have that levity, where we can show up that life is working for us, and be in that place regardless of what's going on. It's the calm when you are in the middle of the storm, when all of the storm is going around you, and you can go within and you can find that calm. That's when you become unstoppable.
Awesome. No, a wonderful message to leave people with. So, I have four quick questions I like to ask each of our speakers. So, question number one, you kind of answered it before, but what is the biggest lesson life has taught you after 40?
Ah, you can reinvent yourself, and you can do it multiple times.
Very good. So, and what is your personal definition of reinvention?
I think I definitely touched on this, but remembering who you are, being that 4-year-old in a cape, jumping off the card table, pretending to be Superman, and knowing that you are Superman, and going back to that place of just remembering who you are.
Awesome. And what advice would you give to someone who midlife is afraid to start again?
Well, I feel like every time I start again, I start aging backwards. So it works.
Very good. So, final question. What does living your best life, or what I call a legend life after 40, mean for you?
Right now, I feel like I'm in a state of just being completely delusional about what is possible. And the more I show up in that state of just being delusional, the more opportunities come to me, and it's pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, Holly, thank you so much. It's certainly been a wonderful conversation. I think it's certainly been inspirational for others people to kind of like understand what is possible, that you will likely have multiple reinventions. They may all feel a little bit sucky at some particular point of time, but there is always an upside. And then on the other side, it's going to be finding who you really are and being able to live the kind of life you're really interested in living, not the one that you should be living. So, for anyone interested in learning a little bit more about you, where can people find you online?
Yeah, the best place is Instagram, and it's just my name at holly.bertone, and it's HOLLY.BERTONE. So look me up on Instagram, say hello. If you send me a DM, say hello, and I will personally message you back.
Awesome. Well, Holly, one more time, thank you so much for taking part in the Midlife Reinvention Summit.
Thanks for having me.